In the frozen wilderness, where temperatures plunged to 40 degrees below zero, where darkness consumed nearly all daylight hours and snow stretched endlessly in every direction, one man became a ghost that haunted an entire army. He was invisible, yet everywhere, silent, yet devastating, a phantom dressed in white who moved through the winter landscape like death itself. The enemy soldiers called him the White Death, and they were right to fear him. This is the story of how a simple farmer from a remote Finnish village used revolutionary camouflage methods that no military expert had imagined before, transforming himself into history's deadliest sniper and forever changing the way warfare would be conducted in winter conditions. His name was Simo Häyhä, and in just 100 days of combat, he would accomplish what seemed impossible, using techniques so innovative that military academies around the world still study them today. This is the complete story of the man who proved that sometimes the most dangerous weapon on a battlefield is not the biggest gun, but the mind of a soldier who truly understands his environment. Simo Häyhä entered the world on December 17, 1905, in a tiny hamlet called Keskinen in the WWII region of southern Finland, a place where winter ruled for half the year and the forests seemed to stretch forever into the distance. He was the seventh of 8 children born to Juho and Katriina Häyhä, a Lutheran farming family who worked the land called Mattila Farm with their own hands and understood that survival in this harsh environment required respect for nature and an intimate knowledge of its patterns. His father Juho owned the farm and taught his children the value of hard work, patience, and observation, while his mother Katriina created a loving home where family bonds were strong and where children learned that every person had to contribute to the family's survival. Young Simo grew up in a world without modern conveniences, where the changing seasons dictated every aspect of daily life, where winters brought challenges that could only be overcome through preparation and skill, and where the surrounding forests provided both sustenance and lessons that would later save his life on the battlefield. He attended school in the nearby village of Miettila, walking through snow and forest regardless of weather, developing the endurance and familiarity with winter conditions that would become his greatest assets. From his earliest days, Simo helped his older brother cultivate the family farm, learning to read the land, understand animal behavior, and move through terrain with efficiency and purpose. The forests around WWII became his classroom, and nature itself became his greatest teacher, showing him how animals survived through camouflage, how they used the terrain for protection, and how the slightest sound or movement could reveal a hidden presence. Before Simo Häyhä ever became a soldier, he became a hunter, and this transformation shaped everything that followed in his remarkable life. His father Juho recognized early that his son possessed exceptional observational skills and a natural patience that most children lacked. So he began teaching Simo the ancient skills of Finnish hunters, skills that had been passed down through generations who had survived in these unforgiving northern lands. Simo learned to hunt timid forest birds that would flee at the slightest disturbance, creatures so sensitive to their environment that approaching them required absolute silence, perfect stillness, and an understanding of wind direction that bordered on instinctive. He spent countless hours in the pine forests and clearings, learning that successful hunting was not about speed or strength, but about patience, observation, and the ability to become part of the landscape itself. His father taught him the most valuable skill any hunter or sniper could possess, the ability to estimate distances accurately without any measuring tools. And Simo practiced this relentlessly by guessing distances to various objects and then pacing them out step by step to verify his accuracy. Through years of practice, he developed the ability to estimate distances up to 150 meters with a margin of error of just 1 meter, a skill that would later prove invaluable when split-second decisions meant the difference between life and death. He learned to read the effects of wind and weather on a bullet's trajectory, understanding how temperature affected gunpowder, how humidity changed the way air resistance worked, and how even the gentlest breeze could push a bullet off course at longer distances. Simo filled his family home with trophies from shooting competitions throughout the Viberý province, becoming locally famous for his marksmanship, though his modest nature meant he always stood at the back in group photographs, uncomfortable with attention and preferring to let his shooting speak for itself. When Simo Häyhä turned 17 years old, he joined the Suojeluskunta, Finland's voluntary civil guard militia, an organization that trained citizens in basic military skills and marksmanship in case their nation ever needed defending. From the very first days of combat, Simo Häyhä began implementing camouflage techniques and tactical methods that had never been seen in modern warfare, techniques that grew from his lifetime of hunting experience and his intimate understanding of winter survival. While Soviet soldiers wore their standard dark uniforms that made them stand out like beacons against the white snow, Häyhä dressed completely in white camouflage, blending so perfectly with the snowy landscape that he became virtually invisible to enemy observers. But his genius went far beyond simply wearing white clothing, because he understood that true camouflage required controlling every element that might reveal a sniper's position, from shadow and silhouette to sound and even the vapor of his own breath. He developed the revolutionary technique of keeping snow in his mouth while waiting for targets, preventing his warm breath from creating visible vapor clouds in the freezing air that would instantly betray his location to watchful enemy snipers. He would frequently pack dense mounds of snow in front of his position, creating barriers that served multiple purposes, concealing his outline, providing padding that prevented his rifle from shifting and affecting his aim, and most ingeniously, absorbing the muzzle blast and preventing the characteristic puff of snow that normally erupted when a rifle was fired in winter conditions. Häyhä would arrive at his carefully chosen firing positions well before dawn, moving through the darkness when enemy observation was impossible, and he would remain absolutely motionless in his snow pit until well after sunset, sometimes lying in temperatures that would kill an unprepared person within hours. His slight build, standing only 5 feet 3 inches tall, became an unexpected advantage because it allowed him to create smaller, less noticeable fighting positions and to hide in places where larger soldiers simply could not fit. Every aspect of Simo Häyhä's approach to sniping demonstrated a level of preparation and attention to detail that bordered on obsessive, and this dedication to perfection was precisely what made him so devastatingly effective. He made a critical decision that shocked other snipers at the time, choosing to use only iron sights on his rifle rather than the telescopic scopes that most marksmen preferred, and his reasoning showed a deep understanding of winter warfare that his peers lacked. Telescopic sights required a sniper to raise his head several centimeters higher to see through them, creating a larger target profile that increased the risk of being spotted or killed by enemy snipers, and in the extreme cold of the Finnish winter, the lenses would frequently fog up or frost over, rendering them useless at crucial moments. Additionally, Häyhä knew that sunlight reflecting off scope lenses could reveal a sniper's position like a mirror signal, giving away his location to enemy soldiers who were actively searching for Finnish snipers to eliminate. He used his personal rifle, a Finnish-produced M2830 that he had owned and maintained since before the war, a weapon he knew intimately after years of hunting and target practice, understanding exactly how it would perform in any condition. He kept the rifle meticulously clean, performing maintenance far more frequently than regulations required, because he understood that in the bitter cold, even the slightest accumulation of ice or dirt could cause a malfunction that might cost him his life. Häyhä zeroed his rifle specifically for 150 meters, the most common combat engagement distance in the forests where he operated, allowing him to make rapid adjustments based on target distance and knowing that his weapon would shoot exactly where he aimed at that critical range. The tactical method Simo Häyhä developed during the Winter War revolutionized sniper doctrine and demonstrated that battlefield success often came from understanding the environment better than understanding weapons. He never climbed trees to shoot from elevated positions, despite this being a popular myth about snipers, because he understood that being trapped in a tree meant having no escape route if his position was discovered, and maintaining a steady shooting platform in a swaying tree was nearly impossible for accurate long-range shots. Instead, he used overhanging tree branches purely for concealment and shade, creating natural camouflage that broke up his outline while allowing him to shoot from stable ground positions where he could move quickly if enemy artillery or counter-snipers targeted his location. Häyhä studied the terrain around Kola with the intensity of a master hunter, memorizing every hill, every depression, every tree and rock formation, creating a mental map that allowed him to navigate in complete darkness and to predict exactly where enemy soldiers would appear as they moved through the winter forest. He would prepare multiple firing positions during the night, improving them with snow barriers and padding, creating a network of positions that allowed him to shoot from one location and then quickly move to another before enemy forces could determine where the shots had originated. His understanding of sound was particularly sophisticated because he learned to time his shots to coincide with other battlefield noises, artillery explosions, machine gun bursts, or even wind through the trees, masking the crack of his rifle and making it nearly impossible for Soviet soldiers to determine the direction from which death had struck. Simo Häyhä's typical day during the Winter War followed a pattern that required extraordinary physical endurance and mental discipline, demonstrating that being a successful sniper was as much about willpower as shooting skill. He would wake in the darkness hours before dawn, dressing in multiple layers of clothing to protect against the extreme cold, packing his pockets with sugar cubes and bread that provided the calories his body needed to generate heat throughout the long day ahead. Moving through the pre-dawn darkness, he would make his way to one of his prepared positions, traveling routes he had memorized, placing each foot carefully to avoid making sounds that might alert Soviet sentries, becoming one with the forest until he melted into his chosen hide. Once in position, Häyhä would remain absolutely still for hours at a time, a feat that most people cannot begin to imagine, fighting against the human body's natural desire to move, to shift position, to relieve the discomfort of lying motionless in freezing temperatures on snow and ice. He would observe the enemy lines with infinite patience, waiting for Soviet soldiers to present clear shots, understanding that rushing or taking poor shots would only waste ammunition and possibly reveal his position to enemy snipers who were actively searching for him. When he identified a target, he would take his shot with practiced smoothness, the rifle firing almost as an extension of his will, and then he would immediately observe the impact, confirming the kill, already scanning for the next target before the first body even hit the ground. Throughout the day, as Soviet soldiers went about their routines, Häyhä would systematically eliminate targets of opportunity, prioritizing officers, machine gunners, and other high-value individuals whose deaths would create maximum confusion and damage to enemy operations. As days turned into weeks and weeks turned into months, Simo Häyhä's confirmed kill count climbed to numbers that seemed impossible to believe, yet were meticulously documented by his commanders and verified by his fellow soldiers who witnessed his extraordinary effectiveness. On December 22, 1939, military records showed that Häyhä had already achieved 138 confirmed sniper kills in just 22 days of combat, an average of more than 6 kills per day that exceeded anything previously recorded in military history. By January 26, 1940, his count had risen to 199 confirmed kills, adding another 61 in 35 days while continuing to serve as a group leader, where his submachine gun accounted for an equal number of enemy soldiers. On February 17, 1940, when he was awarded an honorary rifle by his division commander, Onteros Svensson, his official count stood at 219 confirmed sniper kills, not including the approximately equal number he had eliminated with his Sumi submachine gun when leading infantry assaults. His highest single-day total came on December 21, 1939, when he killed 25 Soviet soldiers in one day, moving between firing positions like a vengeful spirit, appearing, shooting, and vanishing before enemy forces could respond to his devastating attacks. These numbers only counted kills that were personally verified, where bodies could be seen and confirmed, meaning that Haiha's actual total was certainly higher because many soldiers he shot fell in areas where confirmation was impossible, and shots taken at extreme range where targets disappeared from view could not be officially recorded. The Soviet military command quickly realized that something extraordinary and terrifying was happening in the Korea sector, that their soldiers were being killed by what seemed like an invisible enemy who could strike at any time from any direction without warning. Reports from the front lines described a phantom sniper dressed in white who appeared and disappeared like a ghost, whose shots were impossibly accurate, and who had killed so many Soviet soldiers that entire units were becoming demoralized and afraid to move during daylight hours. Soviet commanders gave Haiha the nickname Belaya Smrt, which translated to White Death, a name that spread through the ranks and came to represent every Russian soldier's worst fear about the Finnish campaign. The Soviets attempted numerous methods to eliminate Haiha, dedicating entire counter-sniper teams whose sole mission was to find and kill the White Death. But these attempts consistently failed because Haiha's camouflage methods and tactical discipline made him virtually impossible to locate. On one desperate attempt, Soviet forces used indirect artillery fire, launching a massive mortar bombardment at the area where Haiha had been operating, saturating the forest with high-explosive shells in hopes that random chance would eliminate the sniper they could not target directly. Miraculously, Haiha survived the bombardment completely unscathed, though one artillery shell landed close enough to tear apart the back of his greatcoat, leaving him with only a minor scratch that barely broke the skin. The psychological impact of the White Death extended far beyond the soldiers he actually killed, because thousands of Soviet troops lived in constant fear, never knowing if the next moment would be their last, afraid to expose themselves even briefly, and suffering a collapse in morale that affected combat effectiveness across entire divisions. Simo Haiha's rifle became as legendary as the man himself, a Finnish civil guard variant of the Mosin Nagant called the Pustakorva, which means the Spitz, because its front sight resembled the pointed ears of a Spitz dog. The rifle was an early series Sako M2830 with serial number 35281. A weapon that Haiha had owned and trained with long before the war began, creating a bond between shooter and rifle that transformed it from a mere tool into an extension of his will. This rifle chambered the Finnish-designed 7.62 by 53 mm cartridge, a powerful round that provided excellent accuracy and stopping power at the ranges where Haiha typically engaged his targets. Unlike the Soviet Mosin Nagants that enemy soldiers carried, the Finnish variant featured improved iron sights that provided better target acquisition and greater precision, giving Haiha a subtle but significant advantage in the split-second moments when a clear shot presented itself. He maintained this weapon with fanatical dedication, cleaning it multiple times per day, regardless of whether he had fired it, understanding that in the extreme cold, even microscopic ice crystals inside the barrel could affect accuracy or cause malfunctions. Haiha also carried a Suomi KP-31 submachine gun for close-quarters combat when serving as a group leader with his unit, and while his sniper kills received more attention, he killed approximately as many Soviet soldiers with the submachine gun during infantry assaults and defensive operations. The contrast between these two roles demonstrated Haiha's versatility as a soldier, capable of the patience and precision required for sniping, but also effective in the chaos and violence of close combat situations where survival depended on instinct and aggressive action. The conditions under which Simo Haiha fought during the Winter War tested human endurance to limits that seem almost beyond belief to anyone who has not experienced combat in extreme winter environments. Temperatures in the Korea region regularly dropped to -40 degrees Celsius, cold so intense that exposed skin would freeze within minutes, where metal became so cold that touching it with bare hands meant leaving skin frozen to the surface, and where simply breathing the air felt like inhaling knives. The winter daylight lasted only a few hours each day, meaning that most military operations occurred in either complete darkness or the dim twilight that characterized Finnish winters at that northern latitude, creating navigation challenges and making it difficult to identify targets at any distance. Haiha dealt with these conditions through careful preparation and an understanding of winter survival that came from his lifetime in the Finnish countryside, dressing in multiple layers that trapped body heat while allowing moisture from perspiration to escape, preventing the deadly combination of dampness and cold that caused hypothermia. He consumed the sugar and bread he carried not because he was hungry, but because his body required constant calories to generate the heat necessary for survival, burning energy at rates that would shock people accustomed to normal conditions. The snow that made his camouflage so effective also created challenges because moving through deep snow required tremendous physical effort, and the need to remain motionless for hours meant that Haiha could not generate heat through movement, relying instead on clothing, preparation, and sheer willpower to maintain body temperature sufficient to prevent freezing. On March 6, 1940, just 1 week before the Winter War would end with a negotiated peace treaty, Simo Haiha's extraordinary career as a sniper came to a sudden and catastrophic halt. A Soviet soldier, possibly another sniper, or perhaps just a lucky infantryman, fired an explosive bullet that struck Haiha directly in the face, tearing through his lower left jaw and causing injuries so severe that witnesses initially believed he had been killed instantly. The explosive bullet, a type of ammunition designed to cause maximum damage to human tissue, shattered bone and tore flesh in a way that conventional bullets did not, creating a wound that was both horrifying to see and incredibly difficult for medical personnel to treat. Haiha collapsed from the impact, his face destroyed, bleeding massively, and apparently dead to anyone who looked at him. So his fellow soldiers placed his body on a pile of corpses to be dealt with later when tactical situations allowed for proper burial. Hours passed while Haiha lay among the dead, unconscious and seemingly beyond help, but at some point another Finnish soldier noticed his foot moving slightly and realized with shock that the White Death might still be alive despite injuries that should have been instantly fatal. Soldiers rushed to pull Haiha from the pile of bodies, and medical personnel began emergency treatment, though the extent of his wounds made survival seem impossible and recovery even more unlikely. He was evacuated from the front lines to a field hospital where surgeons worked to stabilize his condition, fighting against massive blood loss, shock, and the very real possibility that infection would finish what the Soviet bullet had started. Simo Haiha remained in a coma for 7 days following his catastrophic facial wound, his body hovering between life and death while surgeons struggled to save him and while the Winter War reached its conclusion. On March 13, 1940, 1 week after he was wounded, Haiha regained consciousness to discover that peace had been declared that very day through the Moscow Peace Treaty, and that Finland had survived despite being forced to make territorial concessions to the Soviet Union. In a moment that captured both the confusion of his injury and his dry sense of humor, Haiha learned that he had been reported dead, that newspapers throughout Finland had published obituaries celebrating his life and achievements, and that the entire nation was mourning the loss of their greatest war hero. From his hospital bed, his face wrapped in bandages and his speech impossible due to his shattered jaw, Haiha managed to dictate a letter to one of the newspapers correcting their error and informing them that reports of his death had been greatly exaggerated. The recovery process would prove to be extraordinarily long and painful, requiring 26 separate surgical operations over the following years as doctors worked to reconstruct his shattered jaw and repair the damage that the explosive bullet had caused to his face. Despite the best efforts of skilled surgeons, Haiha would carry visible scars for the rest of his life, his face permanently disfigured in ways that made him instantly recognizable to anyone who saw him, and his speech would never fully recover, remaining slurred and difficult to understand even after years of rehabilitation. Even before his devastating injury, Simo Haiha had become a national hero in Finland, his exploits celebrated in newspapers and his reputation spreading throughout the country as a symbol of Finnish resistance against overwhelming Soviet military power. On February 17, 1940, while he was still actively fighting, Haiha was awarded an honorary rifle, a specially made SAKO M2830 with his name engraved on a plaque, donated by Eugen Johansson, a Swedish businessman who supported Finland's war effort. This honorary rifle had serial number 100,781, and its presentation recognized that Haiha had achieved 219 confirmed sniper kills at that point, a number that seemed almost impossible to military experts who understood how difficult it was to achieve even a fraction of that total. The Finnish government awarded Haiha the first and second-class Medals of Liberty, as well as the third and fourth-class Crosses of Liberty, honors that were normally reserved exclusively for commissioned officers, but which were extended to Haiha in recognition of his extraordinary service to his nation. On August 28, 1940, several months after the war ended, and while Haiha was still recovering from his wounds, Finnish Field Marshal Carl Gustaf Emil Mannerheim, the supreme commander of all Finnish forces, promoted Haiha directly from Alikursantti, the lowest rank for a non-commissioned officer, to Vanrikki, the first rank of a commissioned officer, an unprecedented promotion that jumped multiple ranks. This promotion represented not just recognition of Haiha's achievements, but also Finland's gratitude for a soldier who had sacrificed so much in defending his homeland against an enemy that had seemed unstoppable. The years following Simo Haiha's injury were marked by constant pain, repeated surgeries, and the slow realization that his life had been forever changed by that single Soviet bullet. The 26 surgical operations he underwent were attempts not just to repair physical damage, but to restore some semblance of normal function to his face and jaw, procedures that were primitive by modern standards and which left him in constant discomfort. His speech remained slurred and difficult to understand even after years of rehabilitation, making communication frustrating and causing him to withdraw from social interactions that once had been easy and natural. The visible scarring on his face made him instantly recognizable wherever he went in Finland, as his story had become part of national mythology, and his disfigured face became a constant reminder to everyone of the price of war. When the Continuation War broke out between Finland and the Soviet Union in 1941, Haiha desperately wanted to return to combat, to once again defend his homeland. But military authorities rejected his request because his injuries remained too severe and his recovery too incomplete to allow him to serve effectively as a combat soldier. This rejection must have been deeply painful for a man whose entire identity had become bound up with his service to Finland, forcing him to spend the Continuation War on the home front, tending to his farm while younger men went off to fight. His family's original farm in Rautjärvi had been located in territory that Finland was forced to cede to the Soviet Union as part of the peace agreement, meaning that Haiha lost not just his childhood home, but also the land his family had worked for generations, forcing him to start over in Valkjärvi in the Ruokolahti region of southeastern Finland. Simo Häyhä spent the decades following World War II as a farmer in Ruokolahti, attempting to build a peaceful life and to distance himself from his wartime experiences, though the combination of his fame and his visible injuries made true anonymity impossible. He worked his new farm with the same dedication and skill that had made him an exceptional sniper, applying the patience and attention to detail that had kept him alive through 98 days of combat to the challenges of agriculture and animal husbandry. He developed a deep passion for moose hunting, participating in numerous hunting expeditions over the years and occasionally hunting with Urho Kekkonen, who served as president of Finland from 1956 to 1982, demonstrating that even presidents sought his company for his hunting skills. He became an accomplished dog breeder, channeling his understanding of animal behavior and his patience into producing exceptional hunting dogs that were sought after throughout the region. Häyhä served for many years on the board of the Kala Fighters Brotherhood, an organization formed in May 1940 to preserve the memory of the battle and to provide support for veterans who had fought Met critical sector. Though even within this group of fellow veterans, he remained quiet and reserved about his own experiences. Friends described him as a man who spoke more with the animals in the forest than with other people, preferring the company of his hunting dog Kille and the solitude of nature to social gatherings where his damaged speech made conversation difficult and where his fame attracted attention he did not want. Despite being celebrated as a national hero throughout Finland, Simo Häyhä's post-war life was marked by challenges that fame could not alleviate and which recognition could not heal. He faced death threats from people who blamed him for Soviet soldiers' deaths, people who believed that his actions during the Winter War had been murders rather than legitimate acts of combat. Hatred that must have been particularly painful coming from his own countrymen. His facial scars made him instantly recognizable in public, meaning he could not escape his past or simply blend into normal civilian life, and this visibility caused him to avoid large groups of people and public events where he might be confronted or questioned. Häyhä never married, spending his life as a bachelor in what friends described as a combination of choice and circumstance, perhaps unable to form the intimate bonds that marriage required after experiencing the trauma of killing hundreds of men and nearly being killed himself. He suffered from loneliness and fear throughout his life, with nights being especially difficult as darkness brought back memories of the Winter War and the long hours spent alone in snow pits, waiting to kill or be killed. The modest, quiet farmer who had become the world's deadliest sniper struggled with the psychological weight of what he had done, even though he understood intellectually that his actions had been necessary and that Finland's survival had depended on soldiers like him being willing to kill enemy invaders. In a rare interview conducted in December 2001, shortly before his 96th birthday, Häyhä was asked if he felt remorse for having killed so many people, and his response captured the complex emotions of a man who had done his duty but still carried the weight of those actions, saying that he did what he was told as well as he could, and that there would be no Finland unless everyone had done the same. The camouflage techniques and tactical methods that Simo Häyhä developed during the Winter War fundamentally changed military sniper doctrine and proved that sometimes the most important innovations come not from research laboratories but from practical soldiers who understand their environment. His use of comprehensive white camouflage that went beyond simply wearing white clothing to include controlling breath vapor, managing muzzle blast signatures, and manipulating terrain to create perfect concealment became standard practice in winter warfare training programs around the world. The technique of placing snow barriers in front of firing positions to absorb muzzle blast and prevent snow disturbance has been adopted by military snipers globally, appearing in training manuals and field guides as a fundamental principle of winter operations. His decision to avoid telescopic sights in extreme cold conditions influenced equipment development and training protocols, leading to improvements in cold weather optics and to recognition that sometimes simpler equipment is more reliable than technically advanced systems that fail under harsh environmental conditions. Military academies studying sniper operations continued to examine Haiha's methods, his preparation rituals, his movement patterns, and his psychological approach to the intense stress of sniper operations, finding lessons that remain relevant despite dramatic changes in weapons technology and battlefield conditions. His understanding that effective sniping requires complete integration with the environment rather than simply good shooting skills influenced selection criteria for sniper training programs, shifting emphasis towards soldiers who demonstrate fieldcraft abilities and environmental awareness rather than just marksmanship scores. As Simo Haiha aged, and as the decades separated him from his wartime experiences, efforts to understand the man behind the legendary reputation revealed someone far more complex and humble than the myths suggested. He consistently deflected attention and praise, uncomfortable with being celebrated for actions that had required him to kill hundreds of men, even when he understood intellectually that those killings had been necessary for his nation's survival. When interviewed in 1998 and asked how he had become such an effective sniper, Haiha's answer was characteristically simple and modest, just one word that somehow captured a lifetime of dedication and preparation, saying simply, "practice." His private war memoir, written in 1940, just months after his injury, but hidden for decades until its discovery in 2017, revealed a man who documented his experiences with factual precision but little emotional reflection, as if recording history rather than personal trauma. In this memoir, he estimated that he had killed around 500 Soviet soldiers, a number that included both confirmed sniper kills and those killed with his submachine gun, providing the most authoritative count of his achievements, even though official records showed lower numbers due to the difficulty of confirming kills under combat conditions. Haiha spent his final years in a war veterans nursing home in Hamina, cared for by staff who understood his needs and who treated him with the respect his service deserved, finally dying on April 1, 2002, at the age of 96, having outlived most of his comrades and most of the Soviet soldiers who had once hunted him. He was buried in his adopted hometown of Ruokolati, in the graveyard of Ruokolati Church, his gravestone bearing the simple inscription, "Home, Religion, Fatherland," words that captured the values that had motivated his service and guided his life. The story of Simo Haiha stands as one of the most remarkable accounts of individual achievement in military history, demonstrating how a combination of natural talent, lifetime preparation, innovative thinking, and absolute dedication can accomplish what seems impossible against overwhelming odds. He was not born a sniper, but became one through decades of hunting and shooting practice that began in childhood and continued throughout his life, proving that expertise results from sustained effort rather than innate genius. His revolutionary camouflage methods showed that understanding environment and controlling every detail that might reveal presence was more important than having the most advanced equipment or the most powerful weapons. The fact that Haiha accomplished what he did using iron sights and a standard-issue rifle while operating in some of the most brutal conditions imaginable proves that success comes from the warrior's mind and spirit rather than from technological superiority. His story reminds us that sometimes the most dangerous enemy is not the largest or strongest, but the one who understands the battlefield better than anyone else, who can become invisible when others remain visible, and who combines patience with decisive action at precisely the right moment. The 500 enemy soldiers who fell to Hai-Ha's rifle learned too late that the frozen Finnish forests contained a threat unlike anything their military training had prepared them for. A ghost in white who appeared from nowhere, struck with lethal precision and vanished before retaliation was possible. Today, more than 80 years after the Winter War ended, Simo Hai-Ha remains the deadliest sniper in recorded history. His methods are still studied in military academies worldwide. His legacy continues to influence how armies train their snipers and how soldiers understand the relationship between warrior and environment. He was a farmer who became a legend, a quiet man who became known as the White Death, a soldier who changed warfare forever through innovations born not from technology, but from a lifetime of observation, patience, and respect for the natural world. His story proves that sometimes the greatest military genius comes not from generals with vast armies, but from a single soldier who truly understands his craft, who prepares completely, and who brings absolute dedication to his mission. This is the complete story of the sniper whose camouflage methods killed 500 enemy soldiers, the man who defended his homeland against impossible odds, and the legend who will never be forgotten as long as people remember the Winter War and the extraordinary Finnish resistance that shocked the world.